Our last job before we tackle masts is to paint up the chimney and install that. So again, using the same metal black paint that we've used on the guns. So we're going to paint that up inside and out, and then we can plop that into its location on the deck. So now things change and we move from following the instruction guide fundamentally to now following the plans fundamentally, using the instructions as a reference guide, photo reference guide, and so on. So what you need to do is get yourself familiar with the plan sheets. Plan sheet 10 deals with the main mast, and then the next one, plan sheet 11, deals with your spars and the bowsprit. So we need to be making up all of these really before we do anything else, and get all of these in a state ready to be installed. So the first thing you want to do is identify on your from your wood dowels which are the dowels that you're using for the various different masts, spars, and so on. The main mast will be the easiest to identify because it will be the widest, and then get familiar with your plans. It tells you, if you look, it'll tell you what is the front face, it'll tell you whether it's a side view or a rear view, and it's showing you where different elements go. On here we've got a little plan of the threads, and it gives you the sizes, but you want to go and put your part numbers against there, so that you can quickly reference which thread it is. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is write my part numbers against the threads, and my part numbers against the blocks. Then it's easy to just grab the right bag or right spool of material. Then we want to be getting out the first dowel and getting it against the plan and starting to cut it to length. Now you'll notice when you look at this, it says main mast 6mm dowel times 303mm long, and you can see that we need to reduce the size of the top to 4mm, so we've got to take 2mm out of that. Because this is an absolute beginner's build, we're going to assume that you've got no way of doing that other than with a knife and some abrasive papers, so that's how we're going to do it. It does also say on here there's a line for a boom saddle position, which is part 81, which we're going to have to fix into place as well. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to work on this lower part of the main mast, then we can move to the top mast, then we can move to fitting the two together and just one at a time. If you look at the whole thing, you'll overpower yourself, but just get familiar with it, have a good look at it, understand how they work, get things labelled up, and then away you can go. So first thing we want to measure out, there's our deck line. We don't need to mark that off, it's just for reference, but we do need to mark this line off here, which is for this saddle position. So we'll be adding the saddle a little bit later once we've finished shaping the dowel, but we've got this line here and we can just mark against that line where that is, and we know that's the point we need to add the saddle, and then we can come to here and we can mark against that line, and we know that is where we start to thin the mast down. Now we know it needs to be 4 millimeters. I'm going to put a line there, but we can check that by measuring it. It says 38 millimeters, so we can check that is 38 millimeters, and yes it is, and I can check that that is 38 millimeters. Yes it is. So next thing is to just draw that line all the way around, keeping it nice and straight, and then we can start thinning this down, and I'll show you how we're going to do that in a moment. So let me draw the line and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so we're ready to start thinning the dowel down now, and what I'm using a wood carving knife here, but any craft knife will do. You can use a number 11 blade certainly, and we're just going to make a small cut where we've drawn that line, and then we're just going to take a little bit of material out, and that's just finding our termination point, and we just follow that line with our knife and take a small amount out. So I'm just trimming it down. So what we've done is we've cut a little bit of a wedge out, almost like we're cutting a tree down, and that's so that we get a nice straight flat termination edge. So just little bits. We don't need to be trying to get down to 4 millimeters thin at this stage. 2 millimeters is a surprising amount to take off, and I don't mean it's surprising we're having to take that much off. You'll be surprised how much material ends up on your cutting mat taking 2 millimeters off. It will take longer than you think to do this. Okay, there we go. So now we can start trimming this down. So you can do it with a knife like this and just trim a flat onto it. But I prefer to do it slightly differently, so I'm going to show you that way. I mean, I usually do these actually on a lathe, but for beginners, we're not going to do that. So let me show you the alternative tool. So obviously, we have to keep checking the thickness of this as we go. You can use calipers. That's a really good way of doing it. I quite like using a manual thickness gauge because it's quicker and easier than the calipers for me. So I can just plump it on there and it'll tell me I'm actually fractionally over 6. So whichever way you want to do it, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, 6.1. So you need to have these tools to hand whilst you're reducing this down. And what we're going to do is we're going to trim down the majority of the dowel, and then we're going to finish it by sanding it smooth and in a circular shape. It will take a little bit of time, but it is good fun. And the tool that I wanted to show you, this is now satin of ice. Got a little bit of cardboard there just to protect the surface, but that is now satin of ice. I'm actually going to just change the angle a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to use something called a spoke shave, which I've used for a few years. I've had a spoke shave since I was about 15. And then recently I lost it and I've had to buy a new one. So I've not actually used this particular one before, but spoke shave as a tool I have used many times. So this is the first outing for this particular one. So there we go. This is the spoke shave, mini spoke shave. And it's basically like a plane, but what you do is you draw towards yourself, and it's designed to make spoke shapes, and that's pretty much what we're doing. So it's absolutely perfect for the job. So I'm just going to adjust the blade and get this set up, and then we'll have a look at it in action. There we go. And you see it takes off a shaving a bit like a plane. So we've put a flat in there. So you might be wondering why we're putting a flat in. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to keep moving this around and putting a flat in and a flat in, so you get like a octagonal shape. And then you go in and you take the corners of that octagonal shape and you shave those down, and that's how you quickly reduce this. So I'm going to use a spoke shave, but you can absolutely do this with a knife. So I'm going to show you now. There we go. This is why I've left the extension on, so if anything breaks away at the top, which it can sometimes do, it's not affecting the area that we're wanting to reduce down. But be careful, don't take too much off. There you go, you can see that's an octagonal shape now. So if I take this out of the vise, you'll be able to see. You can see you've got a flat, sort of, and a flat, and a flat. And then what we'll do is we'll take away material from that edge. And then when we think we've taken 1.5 millimeters off, thereabouts, that's when we start sanding it round and making it all smooth. So that's the basic process. I'm going to trim this into an octagon. I might film some more of the trimming process and you can see some of the progress, and then I'll come back to you properly when we start the sanding and talk you through that. When you think you're nearly there, get yourself some sandpaper. This is 80 grit. Just loop it round like so and twist your dowel inside, just pinching it closed, and that rotation will gently sand it down. and then periodically stop, take a measurement, see where you're up to. 4.5. So we keep doing that until we've got it down to 4, and we've got a nice smooth step down in our mast. When you've finished the sanding, you should be able to fit this part, which is, I'm forgetting what number it is, it says 116 on here, but I think one is 116, and oh yeah, they're both 116, sorry. So part 116, they're both the same. They should be able to fit nice and snugly over the top of your mast. So what you want is not for it to be loose and rattling about, but for it to pass and you know that you're done. So that's that done. Now we've got that out for checking, we can sand all this clean and put that to one side. And the next thing to do is the little bits and pieces that we need to do with this, ready for doing the topmast. So yeah, I'm going to get out the parts that we need, and then we'll have a look at some of those measurements, but I'm going to clean this up first. Before we glue the chimney in, we just need to blacken the base here so that when you're looking down at it, you're not going to see wood, you're just not going to see anything, it'll be totally black. It's these little things that make a difference when you're viewing a model, and it's the difference between it looking authentic and suddenly looking like a model. So just a quick coat of black, and now we can glue our chimney in. Small amount of medium CA, we don't need to put too much on. You don't want it oozing up over the sides. So I put a bit on and I'll spread it out a little bit, and then we can plop that into place. Make sure it's sitting squarely, and that's our chimney in. Once we've test fitted this and we know that that's all fitting okay, we can then put the second one on the top. None of these are glued in now, we're just test fitting. And then insert your 4mm dowel and check that that fits. I found that I had to give my surface a gentle sand. I used an 800 grit just to make it a little smoother, so that it would slide in and out okay. So we'll just check fitting that is all good. Now this area we're going to paint black. So what you're going to do is you're going to paint these separately. Glue the first one into place, paint that, glue that one into place, and then you're going to insert this and paint the centre section afterwards. Now take a careful look at your plans, because it does show that the bottom of this sticks out ever so slightly, and you need it to do that. Also, you've got a little angle here and it shouldn't be flat, it should be at a slight angle, and you have to account for that. It's only a minor angle, but it is enough to make the bottom of this look like it's not square. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So we can do it sort of flush, and you've got a little wedge shape at the bottom like that. So once you've achieved that, you can glue that one into place with a little bit of wood glue, and then you do the same with the upper one, and then you're ready to cut your 4mm dowel to the length required on the plan for the upper mast, which we've then got to taper. So let's get this cut to length and see how we're going to taper this. So laying our dowel out on our plan and making sure that we're square at the bottom there, I can mark out the point I need to cut, and that gives me the height of my top of the mast there. So we can cut that off, and we know we're tapering this. Now the instructions tell you that the first section is 4mm, and that you should measure 41mm before you start tapering. As you will see, 41mm is just about half a millimetre taller than this assembly is. So you're basically tapering from this point upwards. So that's the reason for not tapering the bottom section, and we can see here the little angle that we were talking about. So 84.49 degrees rotation of that block, and that's because you've got a mast that's sweeping back slightly. So you can now cut your dowel to length. You can paint your mast caps and the upper part of the lower mast section ready for installing this once we've tapered it. So I will do the painting of that off camera, and then I'll come back to you when we're cutting the dowel to length, and then start the process of tapering. When the two parts will sit nicely on top of each other, you know you've got the angles exactly the same, so that's a good little test. So we can put our second dowel in now, and we know that is all sitting correctly. There we go. So that can be painted and glued in now. We don't want to glue this mast in because we've still got to taper it, but what we can do is say, right, we know where the tapering point is going to be. So I'm just going to mark that off with my pencil, so I know that I am tapering from this point here, and what we'll do is we'll put a little bit of tape around it. And that'll protect it from being sanded and give us a nice hard start edge. But because it's a taper, you're not really going to notice it. We've got to get it down to 1.5mm at the end here, but it's a gradual decline. So we now know what we're doing with the tapering of that. We can put that to one side. I'm going to paint the underside of this block, then it can be glued into position, and then we can paint the rest of it and this block at our leisure then. So I'm going to show you how to go about tapering the upper part of the mast. I've got some, I think it's 180 grit, sandpaper, glass paper here, and we're simply going to rip a strip off and just fold it in half. Like so, and what we're doing is creating a length of glass paper that we can hold like that, and we're just going to run the mast backwards and forwards, and that's going to slowly reduce down the wood as we need. You're going to spend more time at the top, less time at the bottom, and what you're going to do is you're going to go up and down and keep twisting it round. It's a little time consuming because it's a manual process, but it does absolutely work. And then periodically you need to stop and just measure where you're up to. You're trying to make sure that you've got no steps or anything, so you're doing nice smooth strokes. Start with just doing the end, then expand it so you're going further down. As you get closer to 1.5 at the top, you can sort of blend it all in. Make sure it's nice and even, but that is the bit you're measuring. You want to make sure that that is your correct diameter. It does tell you on the plans, where are we? It does tell you here 1.5mm diameter is what you're looking for. So we reduce that down. You should be able to put this on here and it be and you'll be able to see the line. You should be sort of fitting that line. So that's the idea. We've got a couple of holes to drill. Don't drill them until you've got it tapered, and then we can put on these little parts here before we glue the complete mast together. We've got more of the Part 80s to go on here as well. I think they're 79 at the top, Part 80 at the bottom. I think there's only 2 of those, and then we've got Part 81 at the back. So we want to glue these parts together first before we put that on and that on, to make sure we're getting the orientation correct, because that faces forwards and that faces backwards. So as you can see on this final one here, and then we've also got to put some eye bolts in, which means we've got some more holes to drill and we've got some blocks to add onto those eyes. So there's all sorts of bits and pieces we've still got to do, but the first step is to get this tapered. and then we can start building the bits and pieces up. As you get close to the goal of 1.5 millimeters at the top, you have to be careful, because this is getting thinner and thinner and more flexible. It will be easy to break it. So it's really important that when you're sanding in this direction, because you've got your hand there, you're giving it a lot of support. If you're tempted to sort of do it like that, you're going to put pressure on it, it's going to snap. So it's better to just support it, sand it, rotate it, so that you don't have any mishaps. If you do break it, you're going to have to buy yourself another dowel from one of the supply shops online, wait for it to be delivered and have another go. But with a little bit of care, you will get there and you won't have any problems. So that is the tapering done on the top mast here, and that should fit nicely in there now, which it does. So the next thing we've got to do is probably drill the holes in it. I think will be easier. Easier to do it now before this is mounted onto the mast as an assembly. As you look through the page, to assemble the finished mast, we have some eye bolts that we need to install. So there's 5 of those. They're all photo etch part number 1. So I've got those chemically blackening while we're sorting out the other bits. We've got little cleats that need to be put on, 2 different sizes. So they're all there. And then we've got part 81, which is the boom saddle, which is also there. But we've also got this little top cap as well, so I need to dig that out. That's part 117. For now I'm leaving the blocks. We'll tie them on when the mast is assembled. I think the trickiest block, I mean, if you've never done rigging of any blocks at all before, then all of these will be a learning curve. But the one that's probably going to be the trickiest will be the thimble. And I'm saying that as reverse psychology, so it proves me wrong. But that should be the one that is probably the most tricky. Where most people come unstuck is tying these onto the dead eyes. But I'll show you how we go about that. It shouldn't be an issue. But we do need them to be movable, so that if you glue them into place, you know, they break and then the knot comes undone and you're in a world of hurt. So we'll have a look at all of that. So what we need to be doing is drilling holes for the eyes. I can't remember what size holes we were doing, so I think we'll go for a 0.5 millimeter and see if that's big enough. And installing our little cleats there. So yeah, I think we're going to start by drilling these 2 holes though. So we've got 2 1 millimeter diameter holes. Now they're not for eyes, because you can see they're still present there. We'll be installing something there when we do the rigging. May well have rigging passing through the mast. That could be quite possible. So with our mast lined up on the plan, we can mark out the point where these holes are. There we go. And so all we've got to do now is drill a 1mm hole through there. So we need to steady that, I think. So you need to find some way of steadying your mast while you drill it. This is the little vise off my drill press. Obviously, if you've got a drill press, that's the best way to go for jobs like this, because you've got a nice controlled straight drilling. But for this build, I'm using the most basic skills, so we'll wheel out the drill press on future builds. But for this, we're going to do it with our little hand drill here. So want to make sure that I'm going straight down. We don't want to go off at an angle and it come out crooked. You know, we've all done it. I've done it so many times you wouldn't believe. So we want to go straight down, make sure we keep it straight. So to help us with it not slipping, I'm just going to use an awl and mark a center position. Which should help the drill bit not slip, and then off we go, nice and slow. It's not a race. Let the drill bit do the work, don't put too much pressure on. We don't want to snap the mast. The second one will be in a thicker part of the mast, so should be safer. There, and we're through. Okay, so that looks okay. I think I'm happy with that. So okay, and that seems to be fairly straight. So over the moon with that, because it's very easy to not get them straight. Right, so we've now got the task of making sure the second one is perfectly in line, and you can see my pencil dot wasn't perfectly in line. So I'm just eyeballing it, making sure that's completely straight. That's our position. I'm going to mark it with the awl again. This time, because our mast is getting so much thicker towards the end of the taper, it's struggling to grip a little bit. So I'm just going to wrap it in a little bit of tissue paper to help it grip the narrow end. So where is it? There it is. There we go. That's not going to move around now. Okay. So I'm supporting it underneath with my hand so we don't have it breaking under any stress, and again, nice and easy. eyeballing the drill bit all the time to make sure it's nice and straight. Let the drill bit do the work. No pressure, no force in it. There we go, and we're through. There we go, and they seem to be aligned to me, or just about. No one's going to really notice if it's a fraction off, but try and do your best to get it as close as you can. And then what I like to do is run the drill back through from the back and just make sure it's all nice and clear, because I'm not sure what we're doing with this yet until we get further down the plans. But yeah, there we go. Our holes are done. Right, back to our main bit of mast now, and we're going to glue on the parts we painted in a moment. But before we do, I want to just give this a little sand. We've been handling it a lot. We've got pencil marks on it and finger marks on it and all sorts of stuff. So just a very, very fine bit of wet and dry, and we're just going to give it a little sand. Now, I'm not sealing anything on this build. So there's no clear coating going on, because this is all about giving you the very basic skills to do the build. In the next build, we will focus more on sealing and even dyeing wood parts. So what we're going to do is just give this a nice gentle sand. Do it almost in the same way as when we were tapering, but we're just going to give it a nice gentle sand and make sure that it's nice and clean, because we're on final prep for this now. And it'll get it nice and smooth. So if you do want to clear coat it, by all means do so. But I won't be showing that in this build. And that's all there is to it. Just make sure it's nice, smooth, and what have you, and we are ready to go. So I still have my mark there, but I no longer know whether that is the back, the side, or where it is. So that's going to be dictated by the position of our little cap here. So there we go. That's sitting down now, so that faces forward, and that's going to be our back, but it's sort of at the side now, that mark. So we can still use it to position our thing, and then that'll rub out with a pencil eraser when we're done. So what we want to do is glue this into place, so let's get some wood glue. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wriggle this up. I mean, the fit is really tight. We're just going to wriggle that up so there's a little gap. Put a small amount of glue into that gap all the way around. It's going to do two things. It's going to glue the part in place, which is what we're really after, but if there is any hairline gaps, it'll just seal that up as well, and no one will be able to see. Now I'm putting the painted edge down, so in theory I won't be painting the underneath of this, but in practice I may need to touch it up, so we will see how that goes. All depends on whether I'm happy with the finish. So let's get that down in place. Make sure I'm happy with how it's sitting. Yep, there we go. That's on. So we'll give that a moment, and then we'll just get rid of the excess glue with a knife blade like we normally do. The little boom seat part can now be removed, and just take a moment to clean off that scorch. We don't want to be looking at that, it's not attractive. Now in a minute we're going to take the cleats off, and it will be almost impossible to get the scorch off the cleats. They're that small, so we will just glue those on as they are. But parts like this, we can absolutely remove it, and it makes all the difference to how your end model will look. Okay, so I've got my my mast now with this facing forward, and because we've got a nice square edge, it stops my mast rolling around, which is also nice and handy. And we've got our position here for our boom, so we're going to glue that on there like that. So just a tiny amount of wood glue on the inside. And we can carefully place that on. Make sure it's straight. If it looks straight, it probably is straight. And if it's not straight and it dries, blame the carpenter. So there we go, that is that on. I'm just checking it side on to make sure it's square, which it is. So we'll give that a moment, and then we'll just clean that glue up. So our mast is starting to come alive. So the next thing is, now we've got an orientation for the mast, we've got a couple of cleats, I think larger cleats to add on to this. So let's have a look. It's the Part18. So yeah, that's the larger cleats. So let's get a couple of those out. So our cleats are 19mm from the underneath of part 116. So you could measure that with your rule and then mark it out on your mast. But here's a little hack, as the youngsters would say. We can save a little bit of time because the exact measurement is already on the plan. So I'm just going to get a little bit of masking tape and put it at the top of the part, like so, and then cut that off at the top there, and that's our depth. So that's nice and easy. We just stick it on the mast, glue our part on underneath, take that off, stick it on the other side. Nice and easy, no measuring, no mess, and super quick. Right, we need 2 of these cleats, and these parts are small, so they are going to be fiddly, and the connector is on the outside edge that's going to be visible, so we're going to have to do some form of clean up. Right, so we may well have spares of these in here, but I don't know for sure, so I'm going to work on the basis that we don't. So I'm just going to take my file and take that down. You can see it's a little tricky, and we can do the top because that's flat and that's visible. And it's going to look odd that we've cleaned up some of it and not all of it. So we're going to try and just get in and take, he says, maybe if we hold it down on the mat and just There we go. Where there is a will, there is a way. So I'm going to clean up the other one and then we'll glue them on. Right, let's get our tape. There we go. Just have to get it straight now. There we go, and now we know exactly the depth we need to put that on. So let's get a little bit of wood glue and our cleat. Only needs a tiny amount. Turn that round so it's easier for me, and there we go. Key thing is to make sure that it's not crooked, and then we can get that out of the way before any glue interferes with it, he says. There we go. And that's ready to go on the other side. And there you go, that's our cleats on. So that is everything from a woodworking point of view done on the lower mast, I think. I will double check in a sec, which means we can now add the top part of the mast. So we have this little donut to put on the top. Adding this now will help get the width of the upper mast at the bottom and the top level, which will be easier when we're installing the cleats. So I'm going to glue that on now. So a small amount of wood glue just on the top there. We can tidy it up in a minute. And we put that on. And the key is to make sure it's nice and level, and you've not got mast popping out of the top, although you could always sand it. So when that's dry, we'll just, or drier, we'll just remove that glue so it's all nice and sharp, and that's the top cap done. I have managed to clean up even these small cleats using this process of pinning it down and doing half of it and then the other half. It's come out okay, not perfect, but better than not doing it at all. Let's glue them on now. So as we look at our plans, the 8 cleats, because we have them at every 90 degrees, so we've got 4 at each one. This top one is 1 millimetre above that hole, and this lower one is 2 millimeters above that hole. That's an easier measurement than the measurements they've given you here. They've given us 46 millimeters, but I've already put the top cap on, and then they've given us 44 from the top of the cleat to the top of the cleat, and it's difficult to measure that distance. So I'm going to use the distance from the hole. We did mark the hole with the mast right next to it, so know that they're at the right height, and if they're off by a fraction of a millimeter, nobody's gonna know. I won't tell anyone if you don't. So that's the plan. The easiest way of doing this, because the holes face forward, is to do the forward facing ones first. So these are so small that I'm going to do this a little bit differently than we did the last ones. So I'm just going to get my measurement. So I've got the part in my tweezers, and I'm just going to give it a dab of on the glue, which should give it plenty, and then I'm going in at 1 millimeter above. So there you go, you can see there's quite a bit of glue there, but we'll give it a moment, trim it off, and it'll look as tidy as everything else we've done. So we can put the next one on while we're at it. So that needs to be 2 millimeters above. There we go. So just eyeball it, make sure that they look like they're straight and sort of aligned. You want this looking as neat as you possibly can. So that all looks good now. I mean, the holes weren't perfectly aligned anyway. So if we were to do this on a drill press, it'd be much more perfect. That's the problem with doing it manual, but it's important that I show you this way. So by the time you've put that second one on, we should be in a position to be able to remove the adhesive from the first one. There we go. Okay, so there we go, that's the cleats on. To do the others, we'll have to put it in a vise or something so that it's off the ground. Otherwise we're going to potentially damage these. So you just need to think about how you're going to hold it while you put the rest of the cleats on. And what we're going to do is we're going to twist it round and align it with the ones that we've already added and make sure that it all looks good. Nice and easy. A little bit time consuming, a little bit fiddly, but you'll be happy when it's done. Time to get the top part of the mast assembled on here now. So I'm going to put this part on first, like so. And the important thing is to make sure that our holes are facing forward. When you look at the plan and you look at the mast front on, you can see that the holes are facing forward. So always worth checking the plans, checking the plans, checking the plans. So this is facing forward. This bit of mast is presented before of this part of the mast. So you want your holes facing, well, in that direction. So there, I've got two holes that are straighter than the others, and I want the straighter ones facing forward. So we're just going to slide this into place, like so. There we go, and then we are ready to glue it in. So I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive into that hole. And we're going to get that just touching, and then we're going to put glue just around this edge here, like so, and then we're going to gently push that down. If we can get it aligned. There we go. Make sure my holes are facing directly forward, which they are, and we are good to go then. So we can run some CA glue into this part here to fix that into place before we paint anything up. But we're just going to give that a moment. I'm just going to double check that I'm happy that the holes are aligned. Yeah. So give that a moment and then we will clean the glue up. And then we're ready to paint all of that in. And we should look pretty good then. Stupidly, I painted one side of this so that I could have that facing up and not have to paint against the mast that we're not painting, and then I've installed it upside down. So I am going to have to paint this after all, so I'll just have to be careful. You could actually paint the rest of this mast all black if you wished. It wouldn't be out of character for the period. It's completely up to you. I'm undecided. There's part of me thinks it would look nice painted all black, and there's part of me thinks it'd be nice leaving it wood. So I'm not quite sure, but I'm definitely painting that bit.